What's up peeps, Rockskull here. Recently, I've heard a lot of talk in the community from content creators, pro players, and players in general about the boring parts of Ramattra's gameplay. He's become pretty strong in the meta recently for one big reason, his survivability. It's the one part of his gameplay that, even as the Ramattra main, I agree is the least fun aspect to play as and against. On top of the bonus 300 armor from Nemesis Form, he's got an unbreakable shield with 1000 HP, 75% damage reduction from block in Nemesis Form, and the ability to completely refresh the armor in Nemesis Form by using his ultimate. Not to mention the crazy high healing output some supports can put out, and things like Immortality Field, Life Weaver Pull, and Cleanse, giving him more time to refresh his cooldowns. It's simply too much in my opinion, and not a design for a tank that should ever be promoted. And speaking about all of this without the current armor bug by the way, as he is still crazy survivable without that extra 12.5% damage reduction he currently gets on top of blocking. I think Ramattra as a concept is a fantastic idea, and his overall character design and voice acting is one of the best I've seen in Overwatch, which is why I like playing him. Still, the current gameplay of Ramattra is way too focused on survivability in my opinion. So as a Ramattra main, I wanted to attempt a rework here to hopefully fix these problems people have had with him since his release, while still keeping those few fun aspects of his kit that I like. Starting out, we got the base Omnic form, which since launch has always felt too weak to me. The changes they've done in the past have been great, like the increased armor and increased damage. However, I unfortunately find in this form I'm constantly just shooting the tank, and I'm only switching to the Nemesis form to kill squishies when I'm in range. Shooting squishies when they are even remotely far away is a bit too difficult with the staff currently, so I think increasing the projectile speed would be a really nice change, specifically from 80 meters a second to 120 meters a second. For comparison, Orisa shoots at 100 meters a second with her weapon, so this would make it slightly better than hers in that regard. To compensate, I wanted to nerf the damage too from 5 back to 4.5. That projectile speed allows them to actually be a threat from a distance even to squishies, and I additionally think doing a little less damage would make Ramattra players be less likely to shoot the tanks. Another ability I think has problems in Omnic form is Ramattra's shield. This thing is somehow both crazy strong and crazy weak, as it has an insane amount of health, but with a super long cooldown. I'm with Team Spylo and Pixel, where I think long cooldowns within Overwatch just stink, as it forces these abilities to become extremely strong and annoying to compensate for the cooldown. Ramattra's shield is no exception, as the 13-second cooldown makes it so you only use it for one thing, blocking big damage. It feels super bad to play against because of how unbreakable its 1000 health is. My personal favorite moments with Ramattra's shield is when I use it to save someone on my team from a distance, or time it right to block an important cooldown. That long cooldown, however, makes it so it's not worth using the shield in these moments typically. Honestly, you're likely not to have it at all when these moments happen because of that goofy cooldown. A common sentiment that I agree with is to half the cooldown of Ramattra's shield to about 6 seconds, but make it only have around 400 health. This would allow Ramattra players to focus on using the shield for those less important moments, and gives you a lot more flexibility to use it to take space. Another important thing about the cooldown I wanted to change is to make it so it doesn't start until the shield gets broken, or the duration runs out. You can also cancel the shield to force the cooldown if you press the button again. Currently, it starts as soon as you place the shield, and I think that's what's making the devs feel like it needs a long cooldown. This is pretty much a nerf, but I wanted to make sure the shield doesn't feel too oppressive constantly showing up. There's still one more problem with the shield I don't see mentioned often, and that's the cast time. Yup, that's right. As difficult as it is to believe, Ramattra's shield does have a cast time, and I've lost games because of this bullcrap. Don't let the wiki fool you into believing the cast time is 0.03 seconds, as I can confirm from testing it's not. It's actually more along the lines of 0.18 seconds, because as you can see there's this whole animation where Ramattra brings his hand down and then up again when you place the shield, and then there's the whole shield build animation. Ping makes this all worse as well, of course. In my opinion, this should be the exact same as Sigma Shield, where the cast time is at most 0.03 seconds if possible, rewarding good timing and removing those moments where a shield gets placed after I'm shattered. Next we got the Ravenous Vortex. This ability has a fairly fun design, but I'd also find it executed poorly in a few ways. There's so many scenarios where it's not useful at all due to its limitations, so the first major thing I wanted to do is to make the Vengeful Vortex perk base kit. Now before you start throwing your tomatoes, I do also understand how powerful and annoying this Ramattra perk is currently, and I think it's because it's way too overkitted. I'm going to be removing that free extra 50 damage it gives you, and it no longer completely stops your momentum. If you don't get what I mean by the momentum stopping, know a bit ago the devs made it so Vortex instantly stops the momentum of a lot of things like Wrecking Ball's Fireball, Rhine Charge, and other movement cooldowns. This combined with the Vengeful Vortex perk is just ridiculous, as being able to stop someone's momentum mid-air is crazy. With that extra 50 damage on top of this, if a squishy gets caught in it, they are pretty much dead. I still adore this perk as a concept because it gives Vortex a much higher skill ceiling, and allows it to be useful against flyers like it was intended to be on launch. I think it has to be a base kit feature to bring out Ramattra's skill more. To slightly compensate for the Vortex nerfs, we'll decrease the cooldown from 11 to 10 seconds, because as I stated before, long cooldowns stink. All this should hopefully remove those main annoying aspects of Vortex, but still making sure the skill of Vengeful Vortex remains base kit. Now we got the big old Nemesis Form. As I stated before, my main problems with Nemesis is that it focuses way too heavily on survivability most of the time, and not the aspect I find fun about it where you just punch the crap out of people. First thing I wanted to do is nerf the armor bonus slightly from 300 to 250 since it's just way too much right now. And to compensate, I wanted to increase the speed in Nemesis Form where now it's a 25% speed boost instead of 20%. This would make it the same as Lucio's default speed boost. The slight speed buff should hopefully make it so Ramattra relies less on speed supports to use Nemesis Form as an attack tool. Additionally, I want the melee block animation cancel tech to return if possible. If you don't know, near Ramatra's release it was discovered that you could animation cancel blocks and melees in Nemesis Form, allowing you to output even higher DPS. I really like this tech, as it was pretty difficult to pull off and time right, and it came with the downside of slowing you down constantly, while forcing you to be in melee range. If it's not possible to return, I wouldn't mind making it so you can cancel melees with pummels at least like you see here. Now with all those Nemesis buffs, you might be wondering what I have planned for the block then. The main problem I have with it is the fact that you can mitigate so much damage by just sitting there and holding block with no real punishment, besides the movement penalty. This causes you to literally sit in one place most of the time to block big forms of damage coming at you by 75%. There are two ways we can solve this issue that I've heard floating around. First is a resource meter similar to Hazard, so you can only use it for a limited time. The other is after a certain amount of damage is taken, the block breaks and Ramattra can no longer use it. I think both of these ideas can work, but just to make Ramattra a bit more unique, I'm going to go with the block breaking after a certain damage point. Currently, I'm thinking around 600 mitigated damage completely cancels block for the Nemesis duration. Emphasis on mitigated damage here, not damage overall. As you can see with this workshop version, you will be shown as a Ramattra player a purple bar showing how much of your block you have left. Then once the block is broken, a sound cue will play that both you and enemies will hear to show that the block is no longer in play for Ramattra for the rest of the Nemesis duration. This would punish those extreme moments where Ramattra is just holding block in front of the enemy team, but doesn't punish those who use it to block during those crucial moments. It also finally adds counterplay to block, with it sort of being the opposite of Doomfist where it rewards you and your team for shooting it while punishing the Ramattra. To compensate a bit, I wanted to make the slow block gives you to be a 35% penalty instead of minus 50%. With my Nemesis Form speed buff, this will make it so block only slows you 10% below the normal hero movement speed, allowing weaving blocks between punches to be more viable, and the sit and survive playstyle to feel less forced. Then we have the ultimate, which of course I also have problems with. Currently Annihilation is often only used by Ramattra players to refresh the armor in Nemesis Form, and to me this is quite boring. The ultimate also has almost no skill expression, as it's all pretty much automatic damage to people near you, and it leads to Ramattra players using it to sit there holding block. The counterplay isn't super interesting either, with the only option being running away. I decided the ult needs a pretty fat rework, so here's the idea I have. First, the Annihilation only connects to a target if you punch them instead of it being automatic, and the more targets you punch with the Nemesis Form, the longer it lasts. I'm thinking it's plus 5 seconds for every target punch if they stay within the Annihilation for the full duration. This would make it 28 seconds total if you were able to punch everyone and keep them in your radius. As soon as a target disconnects, though, that plus 5 seconds from them gets lost, and it cannot be regained. Annihilation also now does 40 damage per second instead of 30 to make it more rewarding to stay connected. Since Annihilation will still refresh your armor and stuff with this rework, I wanted to give it some nerfs to make the refresh strategy less viable. First is that it can no longer be used if you are already in Nemesis Form, and it now has a 0.5 second startup time that can be cancelled with stuns. 0.5 seconds is about the same as Reinhardt's Shatter, by the way. Overall, the goal with this rework is to give Annihilation a ton of counterplay options, but rewarding good positioning and hitting your punches as the Ramattra more. This would make it less likely to be only used as a Nemesis Form refresh too with the cast time, and the requirement to be in Omnic form. It's important to remember that those changes to Nemesis Form and block I mentioned earlier also apply to this ultimate, so those speed boosts will make them super difficult to escape, which is why I added a lot of counterplay options here. Finally, I wanted to quickly go over Ramattra's perks, and to put it simply, I want them all removed besides the Prolonged Barrier. Void Search is just a free damage shotgun pattern which only makes it good at shooting the enemy tank. Nanite Repair promotes the sit and survive playstyle that not many like. And finally, Vengeful Vortex is a bit too overtuned right now. As I said in the Vortex section, it's part of his base kit now, so. Now the reason I like Prolonged Barrier is that it's only really good in certain scenarios on long LOS maps. And with my cooldown / health changes, it will hopefully make it so the shield feels less annoying to play against even with this perk. Personally, I'm a fan of perks that are only good in certain scenarios, instead of being the option you pick every time to buff your character. To replace those 3 removed perks, we're going to have to come up with some new ones, which I do have ideas for. For a new minor perk, I want one I've heard in the community a few times called Fluid Stances. With this perk, if you cancel within the first 4 seconds of Nemesis Form, you make the Nemesis cooldown 6 seconds instead of 8. This would reward Ramattra players for switching stances frequently, instead of feeling forced to stay in Nemesis for the whole 8-second duration to live longer. Next, we got the two new majors. First is Sonic Vortex, which now gives you a 25% speed boost if you stand inside an active vortex. This stacks with the Nemesis speed, it lingers for 2 seconds after you leave the vortex radius, but it cannot be used on teammates. The idea with this perk is kind of the opposite of Nanite Repair, with it helping you go really aggressive with speed. This perk can be really helpful if you don't have supports on your team with speed boosts. It makes you get a bit more creative with how you place your vortex instead of just throwing it at the enemy. 25% is not much, but still good enough to be relevant, with it being equal to Juno's speed ring if you stack it with my speed buff Nemesis Form. I wanted to make it on the lower end to make sure it wasn't the guaranteed pick every time, and also to make characters like Juno and Lucio not irrelevant when you're playing Ramattra. The final major perk I wanted to add is one that was a feature a while back, and it's called Destructive Pummel. This makes it so your pummels now do 3 times the damage to barriers, 195 damage per punch, but no longer pierce them. If y'all remember, this was actually a change they did to Ramattra about a year ago, but it was only 2.5 times the damage to barriers. I was probably the only Ramattra player in existence that actually kind of liked this change, as it honestly made you insane in certain matchups if you played your cards right. If you think about it, characters like Ryan, Winston, and Sigma become pretty difficult to play if the shield breaks instantly every time. It also gives these characters certain counterplay options they didn't have before. I think the problem was a lot of Ramattra players had a knee-jerk reaction to the feel of this, as it doesn't feel as good to hit the shield as it does a player in Overwatch, not realizing this may have been actually stronger in some ways. I didn't want to make it base kit for those who don't like the feel, but I think the option should definitely be there for the Ramattra players who can see its strengths. So now it's a major perk, with the effect being slightly stronger to make it a bit more attractive for people to choose over the Sonic Vortex. That's pretty much my whole Ramattra rework though, giving a hard deep dive into every ability and perk from a Ramattra main perspective. You can let me know in the comments what you think of these changes, and a huge shout out to the Workshop Pro Roy for helping me with showing off some of these changes to you using the Workshop. I would show the whole rework here, but the Workshop stinks, so there's a lot of changes we unfortunately couldn't do. Please update the Workshop wizard. Anyway, thanks for the support as always peeps, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.
Rock skull. All he wants to do is stream all night. Lobby full, rock skull. Never gonna play with me, but it's alright.